fickle, fidgety little letters.
The world of Elden Ring lies in ruins. But today we don't care about that, because we're going to be looking at little pieces of paper and random stone inscriptions. As I was researching this topic, I was surprised to find that there are actually quite a few interesting secrets within the written languages of the lands between. First things first, let's make something clear. While many of these inscriptions are based on ancient real-world languages, the few that are actually clear enough to be translated end up being gibberish. So instead of trying in vain to determine what might be written, we will instead be looking for connections between different cultures through similarities in writing, specifically for cases in which multiple unique assets share a written language. So, with that being said, the first thing I'd like to discuss is the language of light, the elegant cipher of the fingers. The fingers cannot speak, yet these are eloquent. Persistently they wriggle, spelling out mysteries in the air. The description of the cipher pada and the coded sword tells us that this furtive inscription appears to hang in the air, the language of light which is spoken by the two fingers. A formless sequence of ciphers comprises the blade. Interpretation of this language is performed by the finger readers, such as Enya.
I interpret the words of the fingers, envoys to the greater will.
This is also likely the language Gold Mask communicates in, which is recorded by Corin, who plays the role of a finger reader. This language is unique and appears to be loosely based upon Javanese, which originated in Indonesia. We also see this writing in the White Cipher Ring, and various whetstone blades used to imbue ashes of war into our weapons. I'd also just like to point out how satisfying these cipher weapons sound. This is not the only writing style which is referred to as cipher, however. The script stone item, which I am probably the first person to ever use in the game, reveals more messages from other players. This item also refers to these messages as ciphers, despite appearing quite different from the cursive language of the two fingers. I think this is because cipher refers to the nature of the writing, not the language. Messages, summon signs, and the formless blades all carry magical connotations, and I think this is what cipher is referring to. So, if messages we leave aren't the language of the two fingers, what are they? This writing style is instead the common language of the lands between, which uses a runic alphabet based on ancient Norse runes. The language can be seen in the tutorial messages we find, in the letter Gowry gives us about the secret of Celia, in summon signs, in messages from other players, and in all of the map fragments, in both the base game and in the Shadow of the Erd Tree. In contrast to the language of the two fingers, which requires finger readers to interpret, the game makes it clear that this is a language our characters can read, and in most cases, descriptions or hovering text tells us what the runes say. Interestingly, the aforementioned runic ciphers, such as the script stone and the summon signs, are made up of multiple runes with a central line connecting them. In archaeology, these are known as bind runes, and are actually very rare in the real-world runic inscriptions, but have become commonly used in modern times to represent runic script with magical properties. The Missionary's Cookbook shows us a good example of this. By inscribing a specific bind rune onto a ruin fragment, it can be turned into a script stone with magical properties. This runic language seems to originate from the Ancient Dynasty, as the glowing blue inscriptions on the pillars of the dynasty seem to also be runic, although appear somewhat different from the modern runes we read in-game. There's a clear example of this style on the stone coffins, which transport us to deep-root depths. These appear to be a mix of ancient Babylonian and Norse runic writing, which makes sense if this is an ancient form of the language. These inscriptions also resemble the sword monuments we can read in-game, that were obviously written about events ages after the dynasty's collapse. While both of these inscriptions are fairly faded, we can see some common runes used, as well as see visual similarity overall. While I fully admit this is far from conclusive evidence, it does make sense that the Ancient Dynasty, one of the oldest human civilizations in the lands between, would have the earliest example of language, which then evolved into the modern-day runic script. Even if that's not the case, it is fun to think about. To support this theory, the same ancient runes are found in the structures we loot map fragments from. It's impossible to say for sure who built these structures, but I'd say the best candidate is the Nox, as it would need to be an empire which existed everywhere in the lands between, even the now forbidden mountaintops of the giants. These structures seem to have designs somewhat similar to those in the Eternal Cities, but it's hard to say for certain. At the very least, they are more modern than the Ancient Dynasty. That being said, the Clayman bubble sorceries, which are one of the only references to the Ancient Dynasty we have, does use the Celian sigil, the same as the Nox Night Maiden's mist spell. So the Nox could represent the missing link between the Ancient Dynasty and modern cultures of the lands between. This connection is particularly interesting because most of the small spell schools, like the Clayman sorceries, simply do not have a sigil. For example, the ice sorceries. So this is clearly an intentional choice to use this sigil. The history behind the Nox is such a huge topic that I'm definitely going to make a video dedicated to them in the future, but just know that for now, there's much more to this link than I'm covering here. Some other examples of the basic runic modern alphabet are on the Carian regal scepter, on Loretta's helmet, and in the background of each spirit summon. This last set of runes also appear as an icon whenever we can summon spirits, which can only occur near these stone obelisks which are found all over the lands between. They are known as rebirth monuments. The exact same runes found on the spirit ashes are also found on the spirit calling bell Ronnie gives us, and these runes are probably what gives it this power. One particularly interesting example of runic writing, which actually inspired this video, are the scrolls found all over America's bedchamber. These scrolls seem to be made from white tree bark of all things. America's bedchamber is also filled with towering stacks of stone tablets with inscriptions from a completely different language. What any of this could have meant remained a mystery until the release of the DLC. Within Mesmer's Shadowkeep, we find the Specimen Storehouse, a place which studies various crucible creatures as well as the cultural practices of the Hornsent. According to Slaza's Hood, some of Mesmer's Fire Knights wish to preserve and study the Hornsent's culture instead of burning it all to cinders. The ghosts inside the storehouse seem to be doing research, don't have horns, and use Mesmer Flame spells, so it's safe to say they are not Hornsent and are perhaps instead dead sorcerers which were a part of Mesmer's crusade. This storehouse is absolutely packed full of none other than the same stone tablets within Marika's bedchamber and similar scrolls. What makes this even more interesting is that these tablets are a unique asset, so as opposed to just being reused from Marika's bedchamber, they are intentionally designed to show a link. The scrolls are also different, lacking the white tree bark, but having similar inscriptions written upon them. This gets even more interesting when we find one particularly important scroll in the storehouse, which is made of white tree bark, the Secret Rite Scroll. This scroll is what tells us about the Hornsent's ritual to create a god, explaining that a lord and a vessel are both required. It's clear from this that scrolls on white tree bark contain information of particular importance and secrecy. This paints a clear picture that Marika was studying the most secret rituals of the Hornsent. This is probably why so many Hornsent practices were co-opted by the Golden Order. Marika might have learned how to create living jars, although she certainly made sure hers only used dead bodies, as well as informing practices of Erdtree burial, as Hornsent seem to have done something similar with the trees in and near Elim. Again, while this is speculation, I feel it provides a satisfying answer to the many cultural similarities between the Hornsent and the Erdtree, despite their animosity towards each other. A common language separate from Runic found in the lands between is based on Semantic Hebrew. This writing style is found in the Banished Knight Shield, and interestingly, also on the tombstones found all over the world. It seems this language was more common before the days of the Golden Order, when Erdtree burial replaced other death rituals. Some other cases of unique writing in the game are the runes of Eocade, which imbue their blades with the ability to be controlled at a distance by the user. These runes seem to be based on the Byblos syllabary. The smith script of the ruined forages is another unique and magical language, as this writing allows weapons to return to the user after being thrown. Finally, I wanted to point out that the Elden Ring itself seems to be formed by a runic language as well, which seems unique from the cipher of the Two Fingers or the common runes in the game. The only potential example I could find of these runes outside of the ring itself is on the Golden Order Principa spellbook, but if you know of any others, let me know in the comments. It might also be seen in the crazed writing of the Finger Weaver, who studied the finger runes in the DLC, only to go mad. Understanding the secrets of the universe through the Elden Ring can do that to a person. I'd like to shout out a Reddit thread on this topic by this user, as it gave me a lot of the information on real-world languages I referenced in this video. So if you want more information, definitely go check that out. If you made it this far and enjoyed the video, consider subscribing, and as always, thanks for watching.